After years of whispers, quiet conversations, and unanswered questions, the truth finally came out, and it shook everyone who had ever followed Dr. Tony Evans and his family. At 75, his wife decided she could no longer stay silent. Her words were calm but powerful, and what she admitted left people in disbelief. For decades, she had been seen as the strong, graceful woman behind one of the most respected pastors in America. But now, she was revealing something that made even her most loyal supporters stop and question everything they thought they knew. You won't believe what she confessed after carrying it inside for so long. From the outside, the Evans family seemed like a perfect example of faith and unity. Dr. Tony Evans was admired everywhere. He was not just a pastor, he was a voice, a teacher, and a man who had inspired millions. His church, Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, had grown from a small living room group into one of the biggest and most powerful ministries in the country. People said his sermons could touch hearts and change lives. His books were read across the world, and his radio program reached homes far beyond America. To many, he represented strength, wisdom, and faith at its finest. But behind that success, there was another story quietly unfolding, one that few dared to talk about. His wife, Lois Evans, had always been seen as the heart of the home. She stood by his side through every sermon, every trip, and every trial. To the public, she was the perfect pastor's wife, gentle, loyal, and full of grace. Together, they looked unstoppable. But here is the shocking part. Even the most admired couples sometimes carry silent pain. For years, people around them whispered about hidden struggles, sudden absences, and moments when Lois seemed distant or tired. The rumors started quietly, but they grew louder over time. Still, no one imagined that one day she would confirm that some of those whispers had truth in them. Let me tell you how it all began. Back in the early days when Dr. Evans was building his ministry, things moved fast, the church was expanding, the programs were growing, and the world was beginning to notice him. But while he was busy building his dream, life at home started to change. The pressure, the expectations, and the endless responsibilities began to take a toll. People close to them noticed that Lois wasn't as present as she used to be. Some said she was simply resting. Others believed she was dealing with health issues, and a few even suggested something was wrong in the marriage. Of course, no one dared to say it out loud. After all, they were the Evans family. But this is where it gets interesting. As Dr. Evans' ministry reached new heights, the distance between him and his wife seemed to grow. Some church members said they rarely saw her anymore. Others claimed that when she did appear, her smile looked forced, like she was carrying a weight no one could see. Still, no one wanted to believe that anything could be wrong. After all, how could something so admired from the outside be struggling on the inside? But destiny took an unexpected turn when Lois finally chose to tell her truth. Her confession didn't come from anger or bitterness. It came from years of holding back emotions, years of pretending everything was fine, and years of putting others before herself. Her admission was quiet, but its impact was loud. She spoke about the pain of living under constant pressure, about always needing to appear perfect, and about the emotional cost of being the wife of a man so deeply involved in ministry. She didn't point fingers or make accusations. Instead, she simply admitted that behind the public smiles were moments of loneliness, confusion, and exhaustion. She said that sometimes faith felt heavy, that sometimes she wished she could just be Lois, not the pastor's wife, not the example everyone expected, but simply herself. The world saw a strong couple, but she knew that strength had come with sacrifice. Now, people began to look back at every moment, every photo, every sermon, trying to see what they had missed. Was it all too perfect to be real? Could the Evans family, who seemed to have it all, have been struggling in silence this whole time? And the craziest part, her confession wasn't just about the past, it hinted at something deeper, something that had affected not just her health, but the very core of their marriage. The church community was stunned, wondering what else might have been hidden all these years. Because if this much was true, what else was waiting to be uncovered? When the truth began to spread, people couldn't stop talking. The church community, the followers online, and even old friends of the Evans family were all asking the same question, like, how long had this been going on? For decades, Dr. Tony Evans had been a symbol of strength, but now people wanted to know what was really happening behind those closed doors. And this is where it gets interesting because long before the confession, there had already been subtle signs that something wasn't right. You won't believe how deep some of these old rumors went. Back in the 1990s, when Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship was growing faster than ever, there were small cracks that few noticed. People close to the family said the pressure of success was heavy. The church had thousands of members, new buildings were rising, and Tony's radio program, The Urban Alternative, was becoming famous across the world. But behind all that growth, there were whispers that Lois was struggling to keep up. Some said she was overwhelmed by the constant spotlight. Others believed she had stepped back because she wanted peace away from the stage. But here is the shocking part. Her sudden distance wasn't about laziness or lack of faith. It was about emotional exhaustion that had slowly drained her over the years. Let me tell you, it wasn't just church work that caused strain. People noticed that Tony's leadership style was strong and direct. Many admired it, but not everyone could handle it. Some said that his firm decisions sometimes created tension, not only inside the church, but possibly inside the home too. As the ministry expanded, so did the expectations. Members expected perfection. The public expected consistency. And Lois, who had always supported her husband, began to carry a weight she couldn't talk about. She smiled through events, sat quietly during meetings, and kept everything bottled up because she knew showing weakness would lead to questions. And in their world, questions could destroy trust. The craziest part was that the Evans family had become a household name in Christian circles. Their children were stepping into their own ministries. Priscilla Shirer, their daughter, became a respected author and Bible teacher. To the public, the Evans family looked like the picture of godly success, powerful sermons, strong family bonds, and endless faith. But what makes this story different is what was happening behind those smiles. Some people began to wonder if being in the spotlight had stolen their privacy. Was the family forced to live up to an image that didn't allow space for human weakness? Destiny took an unexpected turn after the passing of Lois in 2019. That was when everything began to shift again. During that heartbreaking season, the Evans family was in the eyes of millions. Tony Evans stood strong, preaching about faith through pain, about hope through heartbreak. But quietly, people whispered again, maybe there was more to her story, more behind her silence and fragile health. Some said she had been sick for longer than anyone knew. Others said her health battles were connected to the emotional strain she carried for years. At that moment, it wasn't just grief the family faced. It was the truth finally starting to break through years of silence. But here's the twist. Until her confession, all these stories had been treated as gossip, rumors from people jealous of their success. No one believed anything could truly be wrong. But when Lois herself stepped forward and admitted that parts of the whispers were true, everything changed. Suddenly, people realized that behind every powerful sermon and every perfect family portrait, there could be untold pain. Her words made people rethink everything they believe about ministry families. They began to ask if this was happening to the Evans family, then what about others? How many more were silently breaking under the same expectations? Her confession didn't just open a wound, it started a conversation the church had avoided for years. People began to talk about how hard it is to be a pastor's wife, how exhausting it is to hold up an image of perfection while feeling empty inside. Many said her honesty gave them courage to finally admit their own struggles. And now people were waiting for one thing, to know exactly what she had confessed in detail. Because the truth wasn't just emotional, it was deeply personal, and it would leave the church community shaken in ways they had never expected. When Lois finally spoke out, her words carried a weight that no one could ignore. She didn't speak with anger or bitterness. Her tone was calm, almost sorrowful, as if every sentence had been sitting in her heart for years, waiting for the right moment to be released. She confessed that during the years when everyone thought her marriage was unshakable, she had often felt invisible. While Tony's ministry was touching lives across the world, she was quietly breaking inside. She admitted that there were nights she would sit alone, feeling that her voice didn't matter anymore, that the ministry had become bigger than the marriage. Her words didn't accuse, they revealed pain, the kind of pain that doesn't make noise, but slowly eats away at a person's spirit. She spoke about the endless expectations, how people treated her like an extension of her husband's image instead of her own person. If she showed sadness, people said her faith was weak. If she smiled, they assumed everything was perfect. It was a trap of appearances. I felt like I was performing for the church instead of living for God, she said in one of the most emotional moments. Those who heard her could feel the heartbreak in her voice. It wasn't about blaming Tony. It was about telling the truth of how loneliness can exist even in the most admired homes. Then came the part that no one was prepared for. She revealed that there were moments when she thought about leaving, not because she didn't love her husband, but because she didn't recognize herself anymore. The constant traveling, the long sermons, the endless visitors, and the weight of being Mrs. Evans had taken pieces of her she never got back. She said she prayed countless times for peace, for a sign that her presence still mattered. But instead, she felt herself fading, like her identity was slowly being replaced by a role she didn't choose. The honesty of her words hit people hard. It wasn't a scandal. It was a reality that many had ignored for too long. And just when everyone thought she had said it all, she shared something even deeper. Something that made the entire congregation go silent. She admitted that there was a time she stopped praying, not out of rebellion, but out of emptiness. I couldn't feel God anymore, she whispered. For years, she had helped others find faith, counseled broken hearts, and supported countless families through pain. But in her own storm, she felt unseen, unheard, and unloved. She said that pretending everything was fine had become easier than explaining the truth. Those words broke the image of perfection the world had painted around the Evans family. People were stunned. For many, Lois' confession wasn't just about her marriage. It was a mirror reflecting the silent pain of many women in ministry. She spoke for those who couldn't speak, for those who smiled on Sundays but cried on Mondays. Even Tony himself, who had always been admired for his strength, was deeply affected. Sources close to the family said he listened quietly, his eyes filled with tears, realizing that while he was winning souls for God, he may have lost touch with the soul closest to him. But what came next was what no one expected, because her confession wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something even more revealing. Something that would uncover a truth that would change how people saw Dr. Tony Evans forever. After her confession, silence filled the air. People didn't know whether to cry, pray, or simply sit in shock, but it was what happened next that took everyone by surprise. Dr. Tony Evans, the man everyone saw as unshakable, finally stepped forward. His expression wasn't defensive or angry, it was broken. For the first time in years, he looked less like the great preacher and more like a man carrying the weight of regret. And when he began to speak, you could hear the pain in his voice. He admitted that in his effort to serve God and build the ministry, he had unintentionally neglected the one person who had stood beside him through it all. I thought I was doing everything right, he said softly. But I see now that I confused purpose with perfection. Those who were present said the moment felt sacred. It wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about honesty, humility, and healing. Tony confessed that he had been so focused on building the kingdom outside that he had forgotten to protect the one inside his home. He didn't deny that there were times he was emotionally distant or too focused on work to notice the growing loneliness in Loy's heart. His voice broke as he spoke of her strength, how she had carried pain silently so that he could stand proudly before thousands. He said, "While I was preaching about grace, she was living it every day." That sentence alone brought tears to nearly everyone in the room. After that day, everything began to change. The church that once saw them as a flawless couple now saw them as human, real people with real struggles and deep emotions. And strangely, that made their ministry even more powerful. People began to open up about their own hidden pains, their private battles, and their silent tears. What started as a confession became a movement of truth, reminding everyone that faith isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's about finding God, even in brokenness. In the weeks that followed, Tony Evans spoke openly about lessons learned. He told the congregation that ministry without love at home means nothing. He encouraged men and women in leadership to slow down, to listen, and to never assume that silence means peace. Sometimes, he said, the person smiling beside you is the one breaking the most. Those words stayed with people long after the service ended. They began to see the Evans story not as a scandal, but as a redemption, a chance for healing to take place in the most unexpected way. Even after Loy's passing, her confession continued to echo. It became her final gift to the world, a reminder that honesty brings freedom, even when it hurts. Tony carried that message forward, preaching not from perfection, but from experience. He often told his congregation, God doesn't need perfect people, he needs honest hearts. And those who had once whispered rumors now spoke with respect, because they had seen something far deeper than success. They had seen truth, grace, and the kind of love that survives even after pain. In the end, the Evans story wasn't just about confession. It was about understanding. It was about how even the strongest can stumble, and how true faith isn't about hiding the cracks, but letting God shine through them. The world saw a family break, heal, and rise again, not because they were flawless, but because they were finally real. And sometimes that's the most powerful testimony of all,